It's not often that a government report generates a lot of political heat, but such was the case with the Trump administration's 1776 Commission report. The interest in that report has also caught the attention of our guest, Katie Gorka. She is the director for civil society at the Heritage Foundation, and this was an interesting project. The Trump administration put together the 1776 Commission to look at history and civics education. Right before President Trump left office, the report came out and certainly got a lot of attention. And then as soon as the Biden administration came in, they threw it out. What did you make about this whole issue?
Yeah, it was very interesting. Well, the Trump administration, first of all, had no idea that it would be one of their last acts. But once the results of the election became clear, they really pushed hard to get the report out before he left office, which is great. I really commend them for that. The report itself is great. And even though the Biden administration took it down within its very first minutes, the report does still exist at Hillsdale, at Heritage. You can find it. It's called the 1776 Report. And it's really a great statement about what's wrong in the teaching of American history and civics today and what that teaching should look like instead. It's a way to get the teaching of history and civics back on track.
One of the things that you point out in a piece at the Federalist about this called How Identity Politics Revives Slaveholders' Argument for Group Rights is that this report really emphasizes the importance of teaching civics and honest history. Why is it so important that we pay attention to that?
Well, so the reason I wrote the article is I thought one of the really extraordinary aspects of this report is that it draws a line back from today's identity politics, which includes Black Lives Matter and the whole, grievance argument of creating victims and victimizers. And it takes the argument back and finds its origins in a very interesting place, which is in the arguments of the slaveholders of the 1830s. What happened at that time was the slaveholders knew that the notion of the equality of every person was that's in the Declaration of Independence was a huge stumbling block in their desire to maintain slavery. And they had to somehow overcome the Americans' attachment to this idea. And they found it in an unlikely place, which was Germany. What happened was wealthy slaveholders from the South were sending their sons to Germany to get a good education. And they were bringing back the ideas from the continent, including the ideas of the philosopher Hegel. Hegel argued two really critical things. One was there is no such thing as fixed truth. Truth changes with history. And the other is it's not individual rights that matter, it's group rights. And isn't it ironic that those who are today obsessed with notions of white supremacy are using the very same arguments in to make their case? I just find the irony supreme.
And both of those items that you mentioned, the absence of objective truth and the importance of group rights, not individual rights, diametrically opposed to what the founders talked about. We hold these truths to be self-evident and also the focus on the individual rights. So these really are two opposite ways of looking at the situation.
100%. And, it might sound like a kind of intellectual and irrelevant argument, but it's absolutely critical because what this 1776 report also makes clear is that when you start talking about group rights, the key question is who determines those rights? It's no longer a distant objective thing where it's the law, for example, is applied equally to every individual. It's some group of elites gets to decide which group is in and which group is out. Every time this has happened in history, it has led to profound oppression and mistreatment and tragedy. I mean, it's group rights thinking that led to, tens of millions being killed by Soviet communism. It led to the Holocaust. It led to arguments for eugenics, the eugenics of the progressive movement of the 1890s. So we do not want to go down the path of group rights.
Some people might be listening to us and saying, well, it's important to get the history right, but does this really have much of an impact today? My guess is that you would look at the identity politics types arguments that we're having today and say, yes, this is the exact same thing that we're arguing about today that the 1776 Commission highlights from our past.
Yep, that's absolutely right. Our founders were so wise. They were not perfect. We all wish that they had abolished slavery from the very founding of the nation. So we acknowledge that they weren't perfect, but they were brilliant in the sense that they looked back at history. They drew the lessons from history, and they came up with this very radical, innovative idea. They figured out how you could create a self-governing republic that had the greatest opportunity to provide justice and freedom for the greatest number of people. And those who would argue today for group rights, for identity politics, threaten to take us back to an earlier age of tyranny and despotism.
Well, it's certainly a very important topic. If you'd like to learn more about what we've just been discussing, you can go to the website of The Federalist, and the article is headlined, How Identity Politics Revives Slaveholders' Argument for Group Rights. Its author is Katie Gorka. She is Director for Civil Society at the Heritage Foundation. Thanks so much.
Thank you.